So, Richard, welcome to SuperLead podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Lovely, lovely. We have a rich conversation coming up. But before we dive into your work and your books and the insights on this podcast, we like to first kind of hear the story of the person. And to that end, would you mind kind of giving us just your story? And we prefer you start as early as possible. Give us as much detail as you can. We have time, I think. So yeah,
Okay.
who's Richard from as early as possible?
Uh, as early as possible. So, my whole aspiration for the performance space was
Yeah,
was the genesis was when I was a kid, and I came
right.
from what many people come from, very difficult homes, a lot of stress in the system. But the one time that we had a little bit of peace in the home was when there was a sporting event. So whether it was tennis or it doesn't matter what the sport was, but everyone's kind of glued to the TV. And there's this like moment of respite. And I always had this,
It
this
sounds like
very
my house too.
I always had this like fond memory of like, this is the place of kind of happiness and serenity. But what also was captivating is how these individuals, whether you're looking at gymnasts or rugby players or tennis players, and how they could do what they did. It was absolutely intriguing. And somehow, somewhere in my life, I decided that I want to be part of this world. And I didn't have opportunities when I was young. And after school, I had to do national service, and after national service, I made the decision that I was going to study sports science, and my contribution to sport was to make athletes faster, stronger, fitter, and give them a certain physical supremacy. And that was the mission. And I go off to the UK, and I take as much
So
of it.
before we go to the UK, I feel like this early childhood, I see you around the living room and you're watching TV and everyone's happy. Just a sense of who's there, your parents, if it were, and some of that detail, just a little bit
Yeah.
more before we go to the UK.
Yeah, I've kind of very conveniently skipped over the detail because it was a very traumatic time. So there was a lot of kind of marriages and remarriages, and there was a lot of
Sure,
kind of like physical and psychological abuse and tremendous
sure,
uncertainty. So it wasn't the place that you want to reminisce about. And 50% of our country lives in that movie. But it was a very, very, and I don't think it's easy for any child, a very strained environment, and in those formative years where you're still trying to calibrate life, and you still have all these kind of brain circuits that have to develop and centers that have to
sure.
develop. It's a very difficult space to navigate.
Yeah.
But
And that throughout from primary school, at least in my language, all the way to sort of the last year of school.
Yeah, no, so it was absolutely, it was like from the beginning, from the outset, there was pressure in the system, and it was different pressures. A lot of it was financial, and then the
Yeah,
financial kind of put pressure on other systems, and there was relational issues, and there was neglect, and all kind of those aspects which became cumulative, and the cumulative effect as an adult becomes very impactful. So I
yeah,
just now we've got a little bit of a side note. In Thrive, it was a passion project for me trying to understand how childhood adversities and childhood challenges manifest as an adult, and they do. We don't let go of them. No one lets go of them. And
yeah,
how it kind of unfold, there's some great science on this. How it unfolds is that if you experience different stresses, the manifestation is very, very unique and very specific. So I'll explain it. If you experience physical abuse as
yeah,
an adult, your challenge will be disproportional stress responses. So anything that happens to you as an adult, had you not worked through it, or if you don't upskill in terms of stress management, everything you experience is so magnified. Your stress hormone expression is hundreds of times higher
sure,
than individuals who've not had the physical abuse or the sexual abuse or anything of that nature. Then,
sure.
if we look at what's so common in most people's lives is the neglect piece. And the neglect piece is both parents have to work. So most families, everyone's out the house at 6, 7 in the morning, and everyone's back at 6, 7 at night. And that's the new reality. So there's a psychological and emotional neglect that takes place, but also there could be abuse. parents who are struggling with mental emotional disorders, parents who are struggling with addictions and things like that. So how does that manifest? And how that manifests as an adult is a little bit different to the physical traumas and the sexual traumas. How that manifests as an adult is an inability to shut down. So if I do get stressed, not necessarily more magnified, but I just can't bring myself down. I can't calibrate. So the smallest thing that happens on a Monday, Friday, you're still going absolutely crazy. Like you just can't settle. And then, and the financial uncertainty is also a piece. Now, most of us have all three of these, or to some degree. And the financial uncertainty, which most of us, I think the world is now kind of ready, with the exception of a handful of people. If you look at financial uncertainty as a reality, how it manifests as an adult, where you're just not sure how you're going to make ends meet week by week, day by day, hour by hour even, is as an adult, you're very jumpy. Every little thing makes you very stressed. So you got this kind of aggregate, and that aggregate, you write the books you need. So you write Stress Code, because I needed to unpack that and I had to move through it. Thrive was very much centered around how do you upskill for the future and how do you prepare yourself for the new reality, which is only going to get more uncertain, more complex, more challenging, more demanding. And our position in the world as human beings is really like in question for the first time in our history. So it's just a very interesting thing how sometimes your past and the challenge of your past creates your future, but can create an incredible future where you can really be very impactful.
Sure.
So,
Lovely, lovely. I just, and I just love the passion of your work, and that it just comes through, even as you tell your story. But I feel like I interrupted you. So you finished your study sports science, and then you moved to the UK.
So I moved to the UK, then came back. One of my parents were living in the UK, and I went to stay with them, and came back to South Africa with this new knowledge, on how to enhance physical capacity, physical performance, and I wanted to enter into the sports domain. But the reality, we were looking at the early 90s. There's no opportunities there. So it hasn't, that whole field does not exist. And here I'm skilled in a field where you can't get a job. So I kind of like do the best that I can. I think I'm personal trained at that time with the skill set. And I always kind of wanted to just find an athlete and find, an aspiring athlete and make a difference to their career, to their life. And what happened was there were a few kids who were aspiring to be better soccer players or rugby players or tennis players or golfers, whatever. And there was kind of a little bit of uptick, but principally I was still looking for my space. But kind of ambitious. I was always looking for the opportunity. Now I'm starting to think, okay, well, who in the world is very successful at this, and what did they study, and how can I study that? And there were two individuals that had clinical kinesiology bases. It's like a biomechanics, where sports science is about physical efficiencies. Kinesiology is about mechanics. It's about movement efficiencies, and that enhances performance. And there were two guys with background who were very, very competent and earning massive salaries. And one was in Canada, one was in the US. And I thought, I need to be like these guys. And I think at that time, their fees were ridiculous, $500 an hour in the 90s. I mean, it's crazy stuff. I thought, this is the golden ticket for me. So now it's still the mission. The mission is sports. I'm going. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but the mission. And what happens is I then kind of go. I find out where one of them studied in California, and he set up a satellite institute next to one of the universities there. And I then go and find a way. I work at night. I work do what you have to. And I end up in Southern California studying clinical kinesiology. And I come back to South Africa, and now all of a sudden there's a relevance. This field is relevant because you can make a tremendous impact in a very short period of time, and you can prevent injury, and you can kind of do what every athlete needs. And I started finding, positioning myself in various magazines and just getting in the right places with a lot of passion, with the right places, just to set up the platform or the opportunity for future success. And what happens is I start at the beginning, a few young kids, can you help our kids in the sport? And I start there, and older kids and a little bit older, and now aspiring or amateur athletes. And then all of a sudden now you've got individuals a year or two later that are actually very competent, like they could be professional athletes. And I'm starting
Sure.
to build up the space. And again, it's with the passion and with the energy, and it's always about acquiring new knowledge and integrating the sports science and the kinesiology bit, which really was a good formula. And
Yeah.
eventually, 3-4 years later, I found myself consulting to tennis players who are part of our Davis Cup. I found myself consulting to, we had
Right.
Olympic swimmers, even one of our Springbok captains. I was consulting to him and some of the team members of the
Right.
team at the time. And it was a build-up, but I started right at the beginning with young kids aspiring to be better, and made a lot of mistakes in those formative years, which one does, but those were really good learning opportunities.
Yeah.
And the mission is to get, like, I want to position myself with the best in the world. It's not the pinnacle of South African sports was at the time was rugby, and I was working with the Springbok rugby captain. So that
Lovely.
in itself is that aspirational piece. But in terms of international sport, there's only one narrative, there's only one reality, and that's the Olympics. So if you
Sure.
want to do something special, you've got to get to the Olympics. And I didn't want to just be
Yes.
with the Olympic team. I want to be with a winning Olympic team. That was the mission. Again, going back to
Sure.
gold, very clear.
Sure.
So now I'm working with some of the South African tennis players, and one of them goes overseas. He said, "Why don't you come with me to Wimbledon?" And I'm thinking, geez, what a great
Ooh.
opportunity. First Wimbledon,
Yeah.
2003. And I arrive at Wimbledon, and he's a player who's kind of moved towards the end of his career. He's okay, but he's about to retire. And at Wimbledon, there was an individual by the name of Martina Navratilova, iconic athlete, one of the greatest athletes in history, not in tennis, but in all sports, in the top 20
Yeah.
athletes in history. And
Yeah.
so he knew her coach, and she was struggling with something mechanically that she couldn't resolve, and she was considering retiring that year, but she still wanted to play a few more years. And how it worked out was this player spoke to that coach, and that coach spoke to her, and what ensued was I ended up consulting to her about a challenge she was confronting that was in my sweet spot, ironically, and there
Sure.
was resolution. Now, the minute
Lovely.
you kind of move the needle on someone as iconic as that, all of a sudden you set up a new platform for your career, and that's when the door opened, completely opened. And now
Yeah.
I was consulting to tennis players, international tennis players ranked, 10 to 20 or 20 to 30 in the world, and many of them. And it's quite an amazing set, because there's a certain expectation. The expectation is, yes, you've got to control the physical pieces,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, it's about outcome. We're hiring you to make a difference. We're hiring you to
Yes.
perform better over the next 12 months. That's the
Yeah.
agenda. And you've got to
Yeah.
make sure that every obstacle and every hurdle and every roadblock has been moved to the best of your ability. And the biggest hurdle was injury. So
Of
the line
course.
between high performance and injury is so fine. It's like a hairbreadth. So you're taking someone
Sure.
to full potential. That's exactly when they're going to break down. And you've
Eesh.
got to manage that line. And so what often happened was, just where they get to this performance point in their career, there's this
Yeah.
injury, and then we're trying to find the right therapist, whether it's a chiropractor, osteopath, a physical therapist. And what happens at that point is I realize that I've got to make myself more indispensable. And to make myself more indispensable, I've got to understand this injury piece better. And
Yeah.
at that point, all the therapists in professional sports, specifically tennis, were osteopaths. And it was a really great skill set that I decided to then pursue. So half the year
Yeah.
I'd be studying osteopathy, another half the year working with athletes at all the big events. And it was a form of like upskilling. So I needed to upskill further. And osteopathy is quite remarkable, because it's not just about bones and tendons and joints. It's about
Yeah.
nerves. So you get to understand the nervous system much better. So now you can augment their physical capacity. You can make them mechanically more efficient. You can ensure that that line between injury and performance is dulled and reduced somewhat. And you can
Sure.
really moving the needle. And the needle started moving. Instead of working with athletes who 10 to 20 in the world, or 10 to 30 in the world, I started working with athletes who are under 5. So now I'm
No
starting to
way.
find base of individuals that are in the top 5 in the world. Many of them actually were number 1 in the world. So I worked with 7 number 1 tennis players.
Not
And
a chance.
and
I mean,
Now,
you say this like it's a, I worked with that manager and the procurement manager. I'm a big fan of tennis, but sort of imagine you working with, I don't know, the current number one or number two, number three. That must be, all striking kind of space.
it almost feels like a dream, but
Sure.
within that dream, it was you never stop moving, you never stop growing, you never stop evolving, and what starts to unfold is this reality. I always thought the performance vehicle was physical. I had this assumption that if you're going to make a difference in someone's career, if you're going to move the needle for a team, for an individual, it's this physical piece, it's the physical lever. And that was an assumption for over a decade or over 15 years. But the higher I got in terms of the caliber of the team or the player, and I also took on a position with the Chinese Olympic Federation a little bit later. But the higher you go, the more you realize that the difference between success and failure is not physical, it's
And
mental.
it did. No way.
It's mental and emotional. It's composure under pressure. So those individuals who can express themselves when the challenge is great, when things are tough, when things are hard, those individuals who can express themselves to the fullest do the best. They achieve their dreams, their goals, their aspirations. Those individuals who, when the pressure starts to build and the expectations become high and the demands are great, and they do what most individuals do, and they just start to kind of decline in performance and show task resignation and self-doubt and lack of confidence. And it's not that they don't have the ability or the capacity, they're just not able to fulfill it in those moments. So
Wow.
the
So
great
you're gonna help us up our mental game, right? Because we all want to win and we're gonna be at the top of our performance.
Exactly. So, getting to this stage, I took on I took on an incredible role with the Chinese Olympic Federation. I was the athletic director, and had
Right.
a tremendous volume of athletes. And I spent a lot of time with their gold medalists, historic gold medalists, and became future gold medalists. And then there was this thing, there was this psychological resiliency, psychological preparation that they would really immerse themselves in prior to the Olympics or prior to any important events. And it's the same thing I saw with number one tennis players, the same thing I saw with rugby players. It's the same phenomenon. And there was an
Yo,
amazing
what did
study.
they do? What did they do? I want
I
to
don't, I
try
don't,
that tomorrow morning.
so what they do is there's and I'm going to kind of track it back to like a transformative study. In 2012, a team of English researchers were trying to understand what makes an Olympic champion. And the analogy is not just an Olympic champion, someone who's competing in a physical event, but our lives. How do we bring our fullest potential to the fore? How do we bring our dreams to life, and how do we do the things that we can do in life? We're all extraordinary. We're capable of more than we actually realize. And so this team of researchers kind of unpacks it, take 12 of the greatest Olympians in that period. And they're looking at, is it facilities, and is it coaching, and is it the fact that they've got more finances and better environments to train and prepare in. And when they started exploring the realities of these 12 individuals, they found that some had okay facilities, some came from nothing, some had tough backgrounds, some had easier backgrounds. There was no uniformity or consistency. And they started conducting these very in-depth interviews and saying, like, how do you perform? How do you excel? And they started up with the first athlete. They started unpacking, and basically the first athlete uncovers or unpacks seven or six strong psychological characteristics that determine success. They're basically saying that it's not the physical preparation, it's the mental preparation that gets us through and is
Sure.
able to support us in our dreams and aspirations, the gold medal. And we're not talking
Right.
silver
And
medal,
these things,
all gold medalists. So these things were the ability to see opportunity in the crisis. We always see a crisis as a roadblock or a hurdle. And the reality is that is where the greatest opportunities lie. And these athletes
wow.
see the stress as the vehicle that will move them forward, the challenge as the vehicle that is going to transform their career. They genuinely see that. It's called cognitive reappraisal. So that was one of the skills. Another skill was metacognition. So this tremendous awareness of self. So the more you understand yourself, the better you can control yourself. So metacognition
Sure.
is self-awareness and self-control. And
Sure.
self-control and self-awareness, if you break it down, it's about clear goal setting. I've talked about this theme throughout the
Yes.
conversation. I had the mission,
Yes.
and the mission continues. We'll get back to the story, but the mission's a powerful thing. So very clear on goals, very clear
Yeah.
in terms of metacognition. There's also an optimism piece, the belief that the future will be great, will be successful, but it's an acknowledgement that it might be tough right now. It's not a denial or dismissing how hard things might be. It's an acknowledgement saying that they're hard right now, but because I'm aligned with my behaviors and my actions, the future is going to be amazing. Then there's the
Stunning.
self-dialogue. So this is a very, very important piece in terms of
Yes.
when things are not great, how do we speak to ourselves?
Yeah.
We don't speak to ourselves positively. How can we have missed this? How can we have dropped that? How can we have not seen this? Am I really good enough? Am I imposter? Should I be here? Should I be doing this? That's the conversation. And these individuals are able to contain that. Yes, there's
Sure.
moments where they need to recalibrate, but they remind themselves
Yeah.
of their successes, and they remind themselves of where they're going. They remind themselves of the support infrastructure, and they practice gratitude for the journey that they've been on. You can't experience negative thoughts and aspiration and gratitude simultaneously. So if you're looking towards the future and you're grateful, the negative thoughts disappear, and they're very, very good at this. And then there's
So even when they're down on the sets, you still wanna stay, grateful and optimistic instead of
exactly,
instead of banging
it's
the
hard.
racket on the floor.
It's hard, if things you've had this dream for many, many years. I'll bring a story, and it's like a really interesting story, but it brings it to life. So it's a story of a woman by the name of Vilma Rudolph. Very powerful story. She was born in 1914. She was born prematurely. And 1940 prematurely, the chances of surviving are very low.
Yeah.
But somehow she survives. But one of the
Right.
challenges that she has is she's one of 22 siblings. And so that's a
Gee.
big family. And
Yeah.
family is not well off. I mean, they're living in abject poverty, and they're struggling. They're struggling to get enough to eat, and they're struggling. Just life is hard. Life is really, really hard.
Yeah.
So what happens is, what unfolds over the next 5 years is that her immune system is very weak, and she contracts polio and simultaneously pneumonia. So she's like really, really sick. She might die, but she doesn't.
Sure.
But in the
Right.
process, she becomes paralyzed through the polio. So she develops infantile paralysis. And it's at a 5-year-old now, she's bound to, you shouldn't even have a wheelchair. She's kind of bound to a chair.
Mm,
And she's got 21
sure.
siblings running around and playing and on the streets and living life. And she's staring out the window, literally staring at as a 5-year-old.
Sure.
And the mom says to everyone, guys, here's the roster. Everyone, you've got to massage her leg, and you've got to try and get her to walk. And that's the routine. And everyone has their time of the day that they committed to helping Vilma transcend her circumstances. And the doctors are
Yeah.
saying it's a waste of time, it's futile, she's never going to walk again, period. What unfolds 7 years later is the most incredible thing, because one of
7 years later.
7 years later, she gets out the wheelchair, and she
Right.
starts, yeah, she starts amazed. Wait, it's just about it. The story's just about to begin. So she gets out the wheelchair, and she takes her
Yeah.
first steps, and it's like just this feeling of freedom. If you haven't walked, you've lost some. The only
Sure.
time you really appreciate something is when you lose it.
Sure.
The only time.
Mm, mm.
So now she's taking her first steps, and the freedom, not being bound to a chair or bound to a bed as a 12-year-old, and the steps go into like a little jog, and the jog
Yeah.
goes into a little run, and she describes the feeling of the wind passing through her ears and
Oh,
passing through her
beautiful.
hair, and
Yeah.
and the run becomes a sprint, and obviously this happens
Lovely.
over a few weeks.
Mm.
And what follows is that she can't stop sprinting because the feeling of freedom is so powerful. So now she's 12 years old. By
Right.
10 years old, she's competing at the Olympic Games.
No way.
1956, she's only been walking for 4 years.
No way.
1956, she's competing at the Olympic Games, and she wins a bronze in, I think, the
Amazing.
100 or 200 meters. bronze medal. I mean,
Oh,
4 years. But this is what passion, this is what gratitude, this is what appreciation can do. But this is where the story gets even more interesting.
okay.
But now what happens is all the universities like say, oh, well, here's opportunity. It's all about, status, and it's about, so let's say, if you come to us, you're going to get a great education and we're going to make you a gold medalist. And she
Yeah,
chooses one of the universities, and she does. The promises are true. So what happens is 4 years later, she's back at the Olympics in 1960.
yeah.
And 1960, now she's only been walking for 8 years. In 1960, Vilma Rudolph is the fastest woman in the world. 2 world records.
No
Two
way.
world records.
Oh man, that's
Then
just
what
stunning.
unfolds is that she gets 3 gold medals. I mean, we're talking Usain
Yeah.
Bolt here, but this is what
Yes,
Usain
yes,
Bolt,
yes.
greatest of our time.
Mm,
Vilma Rudolph
mm.
was in 1960. No, she was what everyone was trying to be. And she was interviewed and she was asked this question, Vilma Rudolph, how did you
Yes,
get the chair? The
yes.
doctor said no chance. Everyone said it was never going to happen. How did you get out of the chair? And she said to me, or she said to the interviewer,
Yeah.
and a quote, the quote, the doctor said I would never walk again, but my mom said I would, and I believed
Wow.
mom.
Wow. That's just stunning.
The power of optimism.
Sure. My
That's the
mom
power
said
of
I
belief.
will walk.
And she believed her mom. And so what happened, what unfolded is not just because I believe it, it's going to unfold or manifest, which I mean, maybe it could, but the
Mm.
reality, because they believed she was going to walk again, they were preparing her to walk. Everyone had to massage and everyone had to guide her into kind of crude physiotherapy. But the
So the
reality
belief
is that
wasn't just the words.
it wasn't just the
The
words,
mom
it was
said this and the actions were aligned.
because they believed she was going to walk. Everyone said, okay, well, this is my job, guys. We've got to get the right behaviors, we've got to get the right habits, we've got to get the right action to prepare her for walking. So they didn't,
Stunning,
the
stunning,
whole
stunning.
situation didn't exist. They acknowledged its existence. It's hard, it's painful. She's in tears, she's crying every day, but we're going to make sure this is not going to end like this. Now, this is what the
Sure.
Olympic champions have, is this incredible capacity to see, one is the opportunity, but two is to see that future that they want, that optimistic future. And even relating it back to my story, I went and did sport science. Coming back to South Africa, there was nothing. There was nothing.
Sure.
I still
Sure.
had
And
to
you
remain
didn't
optimistic.
believe.
Okay, well, what?
Mm. Oh no.
And it took many other professions and skills that I had to acquire over a long time to bring that dream to life.
Oh,
And
stunning. No, so you mentioned three. Let's go to the number four.
okay,
This is just so good.
all right. So number, yeah. So the numbers. So we had one is the ability,
Dialogue.
cognitive reappraisal, see opportunity in
Yeah.
the crisis. Number two is metacognition, self-awareness,
Yeah.
self-control, which all these skills kind of form part of the self-dialogue, the optimism, the goal setting, being open to new realities, and there are others. I don't want to go into too much detail. The third skill that all of these 12 Olympic champions possess, by the way, it was unanimous. Every single Olympic champion leverages off these 6 or 7 skills. The third
Stunning.
skill was related to self-confidence. When we experience blows in life,
Yeah.
some of them might be very personal. Like the first thing we do is we begin to doubt ourselves, doubt our capacity, doubt our skills, doubt our abilities, doubt our role, doubt our position, doubt our future, doubt everything. And these individuals, they don't dismiss the fact that they go through these slumps in terms of belief. They're just able to transcend these slumps very, very quickly. And they use a very specific skill set. And it was formulaic. So here you've got individuals who can rebuild confidence very, very quickly. Knowing
How do they do that?
so there's 4 fundamental kind of strategies, but I'm going to kind of allude to the 3 primary. So
Okay.
primary strategy number 1 is when you're experiencing a tremendous loss of confidence and self-worth, self-esteem. these individuals, these Olympic champions, would go back in time. So they wouldn't think about the future. They would think about all the successes that they've had. So
Sure.
right now, we're fixating on the failure that one is experiencing. And what they're
Sure.
saying, okay, go back in time. We were successful at this event. We were successful in our journey over here. We were successful in these big milestones. And let's put it in our personal context. We got the degrees we wanted to. We met our partners. We had our kids. Whatever that relative experience is. But to go back in time and just unpacking all the successes that are important to you that you've already achieved, not the failure that you're experiencing right now. It's not a reflection of your reality. It's a reflection of a certain situation that's contextual. The second thing they do is they start leveraging off support. So what they start doing is the people around them that they trust, and this is a very important kind of concept here, is that support that is trusted is the only support that can actually move you through these difficult times. And I'll talk about what trust is.
Support that's trusted.
A support that's trusted. And they start expressing themselves. Often when we have a failure or setback or disappointment that's impacted our confidence and self-worth, we keep it to ourselves. We go into a corner, pretend it didn't happen.
Yes.
And we try and kind of work through it in our own time. The reality is that's the worst thing you can do. These individuals would share the experience immediately. Like, I'm feeling, this was a terrible disappointment, terrible failure. I'm really starting to wonder if I'm cut out for this. And their support team would start like really getting involved. And here's it's interesting. I'll bring it to the earlier story or related to that. When I started working with Martina Navratilova, now we're talking about an individual who's won 54 Grand Slam titles. Novak Djokovic has won 24. Just put it in context. She's got 168 singles titles. I mean, we're looking at the most iconic figure in the sport of tennis. And when working with her, we'd arrive at a Grand Slam, one of the big events, Wimbledon or Australian Open, the French Open, the US Open. We'd arrive at a Grand Slam, and the first thing she'll do is go through, am I good enough? Like, are you joking? Like, one of the greatest of all time. And she'll start asking a question to a team, do you think I can do this? Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I've lost my skill. Maybe I've lost my drive. Maybe I've lost my capacity. Maybe I'm not hungry enough. Maybe the opposition's too good. The minute it should start dialogue, and I think, and then our natural response would be to like, Martina, come on, you're one of the greatest athletes. Look at your successes and look how accomplished. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to prepare longer. If you're having these doubts, we're going to go into extended preparation.
Right.
And what would always ensue, she would always win the event. To be honest with you, she always won the event. I mean, that's the irony of it. But I'm experiencing these thoughts. And as we get older, we realize the Dunning-Kruger effect, where like the more you know, the less you know, the more successful you be in the more you realize how fragile that success is. And so you find that it's a trend with older athletes, but the self-doubts and the lack of confidence in those moments can be very fleeting, and it doesn't have to affect performance at all. But for some of us who don't know how to manage it, it has a dramatic effect on performance.
So beautifully articulated.
I've alluded to the third thing, and the third thing was preparation. So if you're doubting yourself and you feel you don't have a lot of confidence in an event or in a certain scenario, is to actually prepare longer. So the formula for confidence in most professional, like elite athletes, I'm talking Olympic gold medalists, is to reflect on historic successes, not current failures, to leverage off support that's trusted, and very, very important word, trusted. And the final thing is to prepare more than they typically do. If you have to apply that to your own life, it could be absolutely game-changing in difficult situations.
Absolutely. Wow. So good. Now, wow, the time is gone too. I wanted us to just unpack just your 3 books, and we just kind of go the stress code, and you go, here is the problem we're trying to solve, and here is the sort of the insights the book offers, and then we go to thrive, etc. So we start with the stress code.
The stress code, yes, it was my first book. It took me 4 years to write, and I wanted this book to be the most researched of any book on the topic. And I went through, at the time, there was no ChatGPT. I couldn't summarize the research. It was painstaking. And I must have read, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of research papers and trying to
Sure.
put it into a model, basically saying that stress is pervasive, it's here.
Yeah.
And it's not going anywhere. It's only going to increase, and we need to be more strategic. So stress
Okay.
code is a strategic journey in terms of stress management. It's just looking at it from a structural perspective with an acknowledgement
Okay.
that we don't have to do this. And the reason why stress is so important is stress is not the be all and end all. Stress can be very positive or very negative. You actually
Yeah.
decide. And the difference
Yeah.
between good and bad stress is more often than not time. So the longer we've been stressed, the worse
Time.
for us, time.
Yeah.
And the
Okay.
shorter stress, the more it can move us forward. But then there's magnitude as well. So there's threat stress, which kind of throws us into a loop. And there's challenge stress, which brings out the best in us. So what we got to do is kind of take that threat stress and drop it down a notch or two. So stress code kind of
Okay.
really acts, and it looks at four levers, but saying that it's not just about the physical stuff, not just about some breathing and some yoga and some meditation. It's about
Yes.
mindset. You got to see stress differently. And stress can be
That's number one.
exactly that real piece that moves you. The second piece is that you've got to look at relationships differently. Our natural tendency is to disconnect. You can't do this alone. We cannot achieve anything alone, and especially when
Sure.
things are hard. And we live in a society that's intolerant. It's a society that expectations have replaced appreciation. So we're scared. We're scared to show vulnerability. We talk vulnerability, but we don't show vulnerability. And here's
Sure.
kind of where this whole thing gets a bit messed up, because I spent
Yeah.
many years alongside Serena Williams. What
Right.
by far my favorite of all the tennis players. And
Yes.
I worked with many of her rivals and competitors, but there was something about her.
Wow.
She was just so majestic. She was just so good. She was just like everything that someone should be. And I really learned a lot just by being in that ecosystem. And
Yeah.
Serena literally didn't put a foot wrong for years. Like when I say foot wrong, she was always gracious. She was always complimentary. She was always well spoken. She was always the consummate professional. Like she
Sure.
was a and then 1 year I think she just had her baby, and it was the first tournament back, was the US Open. And
Yeah.
1 year she just had an emotional fragility, which is completely normal. And
Sure.
she lost it a little bit. She was a little more reactive. And we say, be vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to have bad days. The reality is that it wasn't okay, because the
Sure.
public took her one moment of fragility, 1 moment of insecurity, 1 moment of volatility, and all of a sudden she had to work really hard to build back the public's trust. And I mean, it's not fair. So
Sure.
how it relates to us and our reality is that we're scared. We're scared to show our fragilities and vulnerability. But the reality,
Yes. Yes.
we're going to have to be courageous. We're going to have to move through this, because it's the only way we're going to thrive. And the world is getting a
Sure.
lot more complex. Uh, This is
And
one of
and I think you're also highlighting that there is this danger of being vulnerable, and people sort of come at you, and then that probably means that more and more of us we go hideaway, which
we
makes the
have
stress
exactly, and I think
worse.
that's collectively we got to shift the narrative, and this is where Brené Brown is so brilliant. Is where she's saying,
Mm,
leaders, you got to set the tone, you got to set the precedent to share your
yeah.
experiences. Sharing your experiences doesn't mean that you're imprisoned by them. It means that you want to
Yeah.
move through them. So in stress code, I look at kind of the relationships as a big piece, and I unpack all the molecular kind of elements to it, and certain molecules that really help us become courageous. The molecule of connection, the molecule of empathy, the molecule of fearlessness. So there's a big kind of molecular bias in stress code and the levers
Stunning.
you pull. But there's
Yeah.
two other elements, and the third element talks to you've got it. The stress axis is something you can turn on and off. So you turn, if there's a
Okay.
psychological or something going on in your life, or even environmental, it can turn it on. But at the
Okay.
same time, turn it off at will. It's a button. So you've got to know that button, and you can turn off in 30 seconds, like literally
No
turn it off.
way.
Yeah. So
Just give me an
it's
example of thought.
So it's a strange thing to do. So breathing is probably the strongest of all the
Oh,
mechanisms.
yeah.
And the bottom line is if you want to stimulate the stress off button, which is a certain nerve called the vagus nerve, what we need to do is kind of control our breath sequence in a very specific way. And that very specific way is relatively short inhales and very long exhales. So I'll give you an
Right.
example. A 4-count inhale and an
Okay.
8-count exhale. And if you perform this for 2 to 3 minutes, your stress response is biologically
Oh,
shut. But there's
right.
an even more fun technique. And the fun technique is
Okay.
to take a bowl of water, big bowl, and then throw some ice in it.
Yeah.
And what you do is you submerge your head, like you dip your head into the bowl of water. I'm not even joking. It's crazy, this. You dip your head into the bowl of water and you hold your breath for as long as you can, up to about 30, 40 seconds. And you
Right.
within those 30, 40 seconds, stress axis off. Some of the nerves in the face interact with the vagus nerve, and there's this immediate recalibration. So there's many techniques, unpack 7, 8, 9 techniques, but those are ones that are like fun and very effective in a very short period of time.
Oh,
To
lovely. And then the fourth one.
the fourth one is you got to look after your health. It's in the past it
Right.
might have been optional. Today it's a prerequisite. You don't have a choice. And you got to guard your health in terms of like physical activity, the foods you eat, the supplements you take, the environments you
Yeah.
surround yourself by, nature. You got to do this.
Sure.
So it's funny how it closes the loop on my journey. I started with the physical and I'm starting
Yeah.
to end with the mental, but in the middle is the mental and emotional.
Okay, lovely. I'm sure anyone listening to us, they are buying the book as we speak, but they are not done buying. Thrive.
Thrive. So
Yeah.
where stress code is saying that if you can't manage your stress, you're not going into the future. You're going to be locked
Sure.
in the present. You've got to
Sure.
get through this.
Sure.
Thrive is an acknowledgement saying that, okay, now that you can manage your stress, who do you want to be? What do you want to
Right.
be? What do
Right.
you want? You want to be successful. You want to create new realities. You want to support your family more effectively. You want to grow in your career, in your status. Thrive is an acknowledgement that this future that we want, we've got to upskill for it. And
Sure.
it looks at all the skills that help us navigate the uncertainty, and human beings do not like uncertainty. The
Of
uncertainty
course.
that lies ahead,
Of
and the
course.
complexity that lies ahead, and the
Yeah.
challenges that lie ahead. And we've seen that. We've seen that every year something unfolds, whether it's political instability, environmental, whether it's global, socioeconomic, geopolitical, like whatever it is, there's something that's unfolding. And we've got to not just weather the storm, we've actually got to bounce forward, not back.
Sure.
Thrive
And,
is a skill set
and how do we
that
do that?
so
Uh,
Thrive, then how do we do that? So
yes.
I think the first step at Thrive, the first part, it's Thrive is structured in 3 parts. Part one is looking at one thing. It is belief that you can do anything. It's really a
Right.
statement saying that no matter where you come from, no matter how hard your circumstances are currently or were, how educated, how not educated, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, you can be exactly what you be and where you want to go. You can achieve this.
Stunning.
And I bring some powerful
Lovely.
narrative. I think even there was an Einstein story where Einstein really struggled. He struggled mentally and emotionally. He struggled cognitively. A lot of people thought he was mentally compromised, cognitively
No
compromised.
way.
He dropped out of school. He struggled with depression, and
No way.
basically, kind of, he was able to create, or a certain environment was created for him by his parents, and he kind of moved into different schools, and just by virtue of the fact that there was a different setting that he was exposed to, he was able to express his fullest potential and become the Einstein that we know. That so much of our reality is built on his theories and his influence. So the first part
Sure.
of the book is saying that doesn't matter who you are, you can be extraordinary. And this is why, and I bring in 4 or 5 different kind of case histories with different contexts.
Excellent.
The
Excellent.
second part of the book is looking at some of the big levers, the neurobiology, the neuroscience,
Yeah.
behavioral aspect. So it does get a little technical, but it looks at some of the levers from the genetic influences in terms of being resilient and being capable when things are uncertain and challenging. Look at those characteristics. And that is a section that if you're not that way inclined, if you don't lean towards science, you can just jump through it. The third part of the book is the behavioral part. Who do we need to become? What are the skills that we need to acquire in order to navigate the world as it is today, but more importantly, as it's going to be in the future? And it's an unknown. And
Lovely.
the skills that I've unpacked there in great detail, the skills I alluded to that these Olympic champions possess and all professional athletes possess, they come from environments that are very demanding. They're demanding travel schedules. They're financially always struggle. Only 1% actually do well financially. They will lose every single week when they compete. It's unless you win the event, or it's unlikely that. So there's a lot of hardship, a lot of pain, a lot of frustration, and they've got the skill set that helps them cope with it. So it looks at 7 skills, and 7 skills, if you apply it continuously and you refine yourself in those skills, it doesn't matter what you're subjected to. It doesn't matter the challenge that are placed in front of you. It doesn't matter how hard life gets and how hard life gets for other people. You'll always rise. And that's a word I really, really kind of lock into, is this word rise, because it's transcendent.
Sure. And part of the 7, maybe 2 or 3 of the 7, and then the rest people must go find it in the book.
So another skill was motivation, and it talks to those 12 Olympic champions, motivation. And we think that either we're motivated or we're not. And the reality is that motivation has to be renewed every single day without fail. We've got to find our motivation. And some of us believe that motivation is best experienced extrinsically. So if it's the carrot that's put in front of you, that's a good motivator. I'm motivated to have a better financial position. I'm motivated to have more status, whatever the motivation might be materially. Or I might be motivated socially. I want a bigger social network, but these are external motivations. Ultimately, the greatest motivation is inside, and you've got to find it. You can call it your why, but unless you find that internal or intrinsic motivation, it's very difficult to sustain motivation. And then there's an amazing, I mean, if I can use a couple of these minutes just to tell the story. There's an amazing story about Safana's son. And Safana's son, a runner, she's a remarkable runner. And she's from the Netherlands. And in this kind of dark COVID period, she kind of came to prominence at the Tokyo Olympics. And she basically said, look, I want to be a medalist in the 1,500 meters. I want to be a medalist in the 5,000 meters. I want to be a medalist in the 10,000 meters. And she said, okay, well, that's interesting. But anyone who understands biology, understand that there's different energy systems that contribute to those 3 different events. Basically, what she's saying is, I want to achieve the impossible. That is not possible. And she'd have to compete 9 days, run 27 kilometers. It's not possible. You're competing against the best in the world. It's like, great. So anyway, like everything starts okay. As most of our journey, everything starts okay. And what happens is she gets to the semis of most of the events, and she's in the semifinals of. One day was particularly notable because she's in the semifinal of the 1,500 meters and she's in the final of the 5,000 meters. It's a big day. It's the day that can really kind of set the precedent, set the tone for her career and her statement of achieving the impossible. And what happens in the 1,500 meters is she's out with like a big field and she's got 350 meters to go, and the runner in front of her falls and she trips over the runner and she's lying flat on the tarmac.
Sure.
Now, it's like an obstacle that's placed in front of us, and it's a big obstacle. What we do is we dust ourselves off and say, man, tomorrow I'll try again. And she kind of looks up, and it's a very brief moment. And now she's got 2 options. One is to say, okay, well, I'll get up and jog till the end, or 2, I'm still going to compete.
Sure.
And all the runners, she's got 13 runners that just kind of sprint away from her. And she gets up and she gives it everything she's got. And she passes one runner, passes another runner, passes another runner, passes another runner. She gets to the finish. She gets to the finish line. She has won the race.
Wow, man. That's just stunning. That is absolutely stunning. And it was the decision at that point in time, eh?
it was a decision at that point in time. And what ensued is that she achieved her goal, by the way. I'm not going to go into the other races and how that unfolded,
Yeah,
but she achieved the goal, and it took everything she had to achieve it. And she's in the interview, and the defining moment was her getting up off the ground. And if she hadn't done the semifinals, it probably would affect her confidence and her well-being for the finals.
sure.
At the 5,000 interviewer says, Safan, what motivated you? Like, how did
Mm,
why most of us would just reconcile. It's done. 13 of the best runners have just shot off in the distance. You flat on the
yeah,
tarmac. And they assumed, they made a big assumption, and they said, the assumption was that Savannah Sun was a refugee from Ethiopia. She came to
sure.
the Netherlands when she was 12, couldn't speak the language, put in foster care, put in homes. And she recalled crying herself to sleep every single night. She came with like barely a pair of shoes, one pair of clothes. Can you imagine a 12-year-old girl, can't speak the language, has nothing. A
Mm,
couple of years down the line, someone notices she can run, and the journey is born, showing aptitude. And then she starts building a community. So there's this assumption by the interviewer that Safana-san got up off the tarmac because she never wants to go back to that place of
sure.
vulnerability, that place of
Mm,
pain, that place of fragility, that place of insecurity, that place where there's no financial means, that dark space. I even started our story in that dark space.
mm,
There's this
mm.
big assumption that's why she got up off the floor. And she looks at the interview and says, why did I get up off the floor? She says, I got off the floor because I love to run. I
Wow.
love it so much. I love
Oh,
to compete. I love the feeling. I love everything about it.
stunning,
And when you look
stunning.
at the theory of motivation, is negative motivation can only take you so far. I do this because I'm scared of. I do this because I'm worried about the pain. I do this because the consequences. And it really talks to employee engagement and operation from a business and operational standpoint is the
Mm,
negative drivers are transient. They don't work.
I see. I
The
see. I see.
positive drivers will not, not just be motivation, they'll be inspiration and transformation. And you've
I
got to find
see.
the positive drivers. And that's a massive lesson that one can learn. So it's like, what are those things in your life that move you without effort? Where do you get
Sure.
lost? And
Sure.
if you don't know what they are, you've got to find them. You've got to go back in search of them.
So,
It's a big
so
lesson.
Oh, I love this lesson. And I wanted to maybe just go a little bit with this one. Because many people do ask, how do I go find that passion, that purpose, that why for me in particular? And it seems like, it's as if only a few people get this lucky draw, right? And then just like that, Richard found it, and just like that, James found it, etc. Is there like a generic path one can go?
There's a formula. It's a question I've been asked many, many times, and sometimes in big forums, and sometimes in smaller conversations. And the path to finding your passion starts with curiosity. What we tend to do in life is do the same things, the same way, at the same time, on the same day. We get locked into the things we like. If you want to
Yeah,
find your passion, you have to go to curiosity. You've got to start exploring things that you would never explore. Do things that you
sure.
would normally never do. Listen to podcasts you would never listen to. Read books
Yes,
that typically don't interest you. Watch
yes,
shows that are like completely not up your alley. And start trying to kind of just explore the world as you did as a child. A child just
sure.
learns everything. And
Mm,
summer unfold is you'll find that you get lost. Let's say the best way to do it in my fourth book that's coming out, there's an exercise on finding this. And the
yeah,
exercise is what do you scroll? If you're on an Instagram or you're on a YouTube or you're on Netflix or whatever, what do you find yourself scrolling? Because that's part of your passion is going to lie in the things that you get lost in. And
stunning.
when you find those things that you get lost in, then you need to start finding connections. When you find connections to things, so let's say I'll give you an example. I
Yeah,
really enjoy food, like, as most of us do, but I really enjoy it. I really enjoy
yeah,
exercise. I really enjoy neuroscience. So the
right.
convergence is how can food and exercise and neuroscience all connect? And
Oh,
it's
lovely.
okay, well, it connect in a following formula. It can enhance, but like it's a performance formula, actually. The things that
Mm,
we
mm,
expect are
mm.
neurochemistry. So let's be more mindful of that. So
Yeah,
we create this in our own reality. But the minute you find your curiosities and start connecting the dots and start trying to overlay them a little bit, and it takes time, that's where
yeah.
passion starts to emerge. It doesn't form, it starts to emerge. Passion only begins when you become good at something. So what are we
Right.
passionate about? The things we're good at, of course, because we can share
Yeah,
them. So it's
yeah.
passion comes from competency. Competency requires a little bit of time and repetition, but the whole journey began with exploring things that I stopped exploring. And then we said
Sure.
that, okay, now that I've got my passion, I'm pretty good at this. How do I find my
Yeah,
purpose? And the purpose is bigger than passion. Passion is for you. What is purpose? Purpose
yeah.
is for the world. It's for others. Now, purpose is
Sure,
how
sure,
you
sure,
help
sure.
them, and purpose is driven off passion. This is my passion. How can I make it relate to your life and improve the quality of your experience in life? So it's
Sure.
curiosity to competency to passion to purpose. Repeat.
Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. Wow, we got about a minute to go. So we ask all our guests these two questions. One is, after everything we've spoken about today, perhaps is there one challenge that you wanna leave with us and say to all our listeners, if you don't remember anything, here's the one challenge for you to maybe start doing tomorrow or next week. And then the second one, we often ask our listeners to recommend a book. But I think here you can maybe just emphasize the books that you have written and possibly where we might find them.
Okay,
Or
so
unless if you have another book to recommend on top of your books.
okay, so I'll start with the first question. The first question or the first request is something to kind of take away with you, and I would say that the most important thing is the ability to regulate yourself, regulate your emotions and your stress immediately. And there's a very specific breath. I talked about breath and influence on our stress axes. And the breath is known as a cyclic sigh. So it involves
Okay.
an inhale again, and an exhale. Inhale, inhale, exhale. And I'd like the
Right.
listeners anytime they feel pressure, anytime they feel overwhelmed, to do 3 of those.
Yeah.
It will give you a
Inhale, inhale,
spontaneous
exhale.
and automatic recalibration, cyclic cycle. Anytime, before you have a tough conversation, before you
Oh,
go into exam,
love the recalibration.
whatever, be a presentation, cyclic cycle. Inhale, inhale, exhale. In terms of book recommendations, my 4th book that's coming out now, that's the book. That's the book. So I'm not going to give the title away. Just look out for
Stunning.
it. It's going to be, it's my, I get lost in it. I can't wait to get up at 3 in the morning and just kind of refine it and keep at it. So I'm very, very excited about that. But I find that of the books that are very moving, I think Atomic Habits by James Clear, very few
Yeah,
people have derived benefit. It really just starts small. Little things make a big difference, but make it easy.
yeah,
I find that mindset,
yeah,
Carol Dweck, it's a
yeah.
must. Just how the way we perceive our reality is ultimately how it's going to manifest and how it's going to unfold. And I think that this growth, she talks about growth mindset, where I can be anything I want to be with enough time and effort. That's the journey in life. So those are my 2
Sure.
picks in terms of takeaways.
Oh, Richard, an hour was never going to be enough, but we are so grateful for your time and the insights and more so the work that you do. And we would love to unpack your next book here and hoping we get a public confirmation of that.
Okay, good. I'm excited. I can't wait. Thank you for having me today. I'm really grateful.
Awesome.